Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome back from your parallel sessions. It's wonderful to see all of you here again for our closing panel. Very important panel. We're going to look at the main sort of questions and issues and challenges and opportunities we've talked about over the last day and a half. We'll talk about the 3 steps forward, what still needs to be done to make gender equality a reality, not in 60 years earlier. Absolutely earlier. So to join me for this conversation, I have with me, and you know Carlin Schreller now, Director of EIGE, so you're going to be on the panel now, and I will subject you to questions as well, Carlin, you don't get away with it. Also, Lenita Freidenwald, Head of Division for Gender Equality at the Ministry of Employment, representing also the incoming Swedish presidency of the Council of the EU starting next January. Panagiotis Chatzimichel, a board member of the European Youth Forum. Thank you for being here as well. And Maud Sake, she's Senior Public Policy Manager at LinkedIn. So thank you very much indeed, all 4 of you, for joining me on this panel. So just let's take a look at what we've been talking about over the last day and a half. And, you know, I've noted some important points, and you obviously have your own. Intersectionality, something that was really, really discussed and very high up on the agenda, my agenda as well, as you can imagine. The challenges of access to data, the importance of data and evidence, no data, no visibility for certain parts of intersectionality, among other things. Crisis, and the fact that, you know, we are heading towards dark times, energy crisis, food problems, inflation, of course, the Russian brutal war in Ukraine, and we're not out of the pandemic. And we heard yesterday, that's when violence against women rises. So how do we prevent that? Obviously also cyber violence, the digital divide, and many, many other issues. So I'm going to turn to you first, Lenita, and to give me an idea of your takeaways from these 2 days. And I think you've been here throughout. Please.
Exactly. Thank you very much. So good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very thankful for given the opportunity to talk here today. I'd like to start by extending greetings from the government of Sweden, and also apologies for not being able to make it here. As you might know, the Swedish government was formed last week. The government would like to also extend the thanks to EIGE for its work on the index report and its continued work to provide evidence on gender equality through research and data collection. EIGE has indeed become a true hub or knowledge center on gender equality issues, so many thanks for that. While the Swedish government is also happy with the results of the index, being placed at the top of the index, is also very humble, fully aware of all remaining problems and obstacles also in Sweden and elsewhere. And as the government is new, its plans and priorities are to be disseminated in the upcoming budget bill, which will be presented in November, the 8th of November. But in relation to EIGE's work, the government has already communicated that it will focus on health issues in its national politics, as well as gender-based violence and honor-related oppression and violence. As my major takeaways from this conference, the first one is, of course, the importance of facts and figures, of data and research. And this is something we have talked about throughout the conference. It has been mentioned, I think, in every session. And we need data generally to identify the most pressing problems, to find reasonable solutions to these problems, solutions that are accurate interventions that solves the root of the problems. We need more data. Data doesn't always exist, for instance, on intersectional inequalities. We need better data that can be monitored, measured, compared across countries, across cases over time, for instance, when it comes to gender-based violence and femicide. We need more specialized, sophisticated data in response to the multiple crises we face today, where women suffer the most, as we all know. And importantly, data is not abstract numbers, as our colleagues from the Czech Republic told us yesterday. Data is about women and men, boys and girls. Data is about real life and the consequences of political decisions. And as the Swedish Commissioner Ylva Johansson has pointed out, statistics is a woman's best friend. So that's my first takeaway. My second takeaway is the need for multiple solutions to solve multiple problems. We all know about all the problems we face today with the pandemic, with the Russian aggression in Ukraine, the energy crisis, the economic crisis, the inflation, the possibility of a stagflation, poverty, and all that. So we need to be better prepared for crisis and for handling multiple crises. And that means that we also need multiple solutions, targeted solutions. We have laws and regulations, of course, directives on the one hand, but we also need a cultural change, more awareness raising, more information, more change of attitudes on the other hand. So we need a change of mindset, and that change of mindset might be more important than changes of legislation. At least we need both. And also it's very important to work with implementation gaps. Just because you have a policy or a law or a directive, it doesn't mean that it will be implemented. I'm a scholar by training, and one political scientist, there's Aaron Wildavsky, as early as the 1970s, he wrote that, he talked about implementation gaps, and he said, you shouldn't be surprised when policies made in Washington, D.C. are not being implemented in Oregon or in California. You should be surprised when they are implemented. So, I mean, implementation gaps are real, they are common, we all know about them. So we need to tackle those implementation gaps. We need to talk about capacity. Those who are to implement the policies or the directives, they have to have the capacity to do that. They have to have the resources to do that in terms of money, in terms of staff, in terms of timing. We also need competence. We need knowledge. And therefore, what EIGE is doing with facts and figures, data and research is essential. And we also need will, commitment by those who are to implement the policy. And here I think that we need to work more on professionals, on service providers, to help service providers that meet, for instance, women that are exposed to violence, that they have the competence and in particular the resources to do their work. A dual approach is needed. And my final takeaway, that's the need for alliances to be made to build an inclusive society. Governments, international organizations, social partners, academia, and civil society organizations. It's key to meet, it's lovely to meet here over these 2 days here. We need to voice our concerns, our anger, our frustration. We need to share ideas and perspectives. We need to discuss. We need to debate. We also need to disagree. Because we see things from different angles. We have different competences. We have different perspectives. We have different roles and responsibilities. But I'm quite sure that together we are quite clever. And we can find the smartest way to find the best solutions forward. I also think that small individual actions can be combined, leading up to great results. So don't estimate small wins. They add up in the long run, step by step, bit by bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lenita. So that's 10 takeaways. That's and you've covered basically everything that needs to be said. Bravo. Thank you very much, Lenita. Panagiotis, so European Year of Youth as well, something that we have to remember. We do a lot of these years, don't we? Year of this and this, but I suppose this one is important for you. But I come back to this one on taking your takeaways. Can you connect it to perhaps your own position at the European Youth Forum and what it means for young people?
I think I can very well. Youth is the present and the future.
Yeah.
And I think what you have achieved through this specific forum is to understand the different life transitions, the different parts of diversity when it comes to local, national, European, and how we make sure that they are interconnected and that we stay, in a way, interconnected during times of calm, but most importantly, during times of crisis. And I think this is an important forum to have this discussion and us as Youth Forum to be engaged, not in a tokenistic way, to just be present and listen people talking, but also to share our opinions, to engage and co-create the way forward. And I think that's one of the strongest takeouts I have to take from here is that all the spaces, all the interactions, all the sessions, they made sure that they're diverse, that they give opportunity to go beyond the policymaker man of that certain age or that certain background, to go beyond the European perspective imposed to the local level, but also to bring the knowledge from the local level back to the European sphere of discussion, to the sense of cooperation and learning from each other. And something that I'm always afraid when it comes to COVID is that we, as humans, have a very bad thing, short-term memory. Yeah. And no matter how many times we say it, we tend to repeat our own mistakes. But what I really like to see as well is that what you were mentioning yesterday, we keep this issue at the mainstream level. We keep gender equality as a priority no matter what else happens. Because as long as we don't provide a more long-term vision, a long-term action, and long-term policy making, each crisis will take us more steps back rather than steps forward. And I think the key outcome that I see from here as well is the diversity of experiences. And I was really touched by the talk today. It was truly inspirational. Not just to bring somebody, but to hear somebody's story and the impact they have in front and behind their camera, in front and behind their profession, as a person, as a role model. I must say, for me, at least as a member of LGBT community, I do see that person as a role model. And I think this is what is bringing also inside this conversation. It's not only about policies, it's about actions and how we foster this creation of role models. How do we diversify who is at the front, who is being heard, but also who is being engaged? Making channels of engagement, which I have to congratulate you. I think you were also with this hybrid format, making sure that whatever we discuss here is also going beyond this room, that there are also policymakers, decision makers, experts, practitioners, engage in this process. And I truly hope it's not easy, I know, and the results are not going to be seen tomorrow or the year after, but especially now that we have an aggressive neighbor bullying, literally, us and Ukraine, or the pandemic, which is not yet over, unfortunately, still affecting people who were already vulnerable, women who were already vulnerable. But at least what I see as a man is my responsibility, and it's something that I really like this conference as well as a takeout. It's not a responsibility of any policymaker to empower women. It's also a responsibility of us as a society to educate men to take action, to allow that empowerment of women to actually take form and flourish. And I think that's my biggest outcome, the responsibility of each and all of us, and also the diversity of responsibility beyond the woman or the average girl that needs to be admiring a role model. And thank you for that.
Thank you for those comments. Absolutely agree. You've said it all, really. I mean, yeah, collective action, the importance of narratives and stories. So, as you were saying, Lenita, the statistics are important, but the stories, that because they actually inform the stories that come forward, and the need for personal role models as well to go forward. And I think at this conference, this forum, where we've been exchanging, there are plenty of examples of role models, which is really inspiring for us as well. So let me turn to you, Maud. The same question for you in terms of your takeaways before we talk about going forward. Let's look back.
Of course, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been here only since this morning, but I think what I've taken away from those couple of hours were first the energy. I think in a room that's always good to, when you're a bit discouraged, to go back, I think, to those types of events and to remember that you're not on your own, only fighting all these issues. But I think the main takeaway is that we are nowhere near where we want and need to be on that issue. And maybe the third takeaway would be the need for data. And that's where, as LinkedIn, maybe we can bring, I think, something and contribute to the debate. LinkedIn, with its platform and its member, has a lot of insights on the world of work and the labor market more generally. And we've been conducting research on the gender gap for years now. It's something very dear to our hearts. And maybe to give you an idea of how far away we are from where we need to be, we've conducted research on women in leadership in particular this year. And where we see, some progress, we see our hiring rate of women in leadership position increase from 33% to 37% since 2016. So there is some progress.
That's what the Gender Equality Index said as well, yeah.
Indeed.
Improvement in women in power.
We see it, but not a lot.
Slight.
Because the overall, I think, number that we have is that women in leadership represent only 30%. I think leadership positions are held by only 30% of women, globally speaking. Of course, we have differences according to countries. We see in Europe 22% only in Germany and up to 46% in Finland. But we also see difference in sector. Obviously, the share of women in leadership position is higher in education or in healthcare than it is in manufacturing or infrastructure. But even in sector where women have a majority of leadership position, there's still a gap between the overall share of the women in a sector and the share of leadership position. So if I take healthcare in Finland, which is usually a pretty good country in terms of gender equality, we have 73% of workers in the healthcare sector are women, but only 60% of the leadership position are held by women. So that's, I think, where we are, and I think that's why I would say my main takeaway would be we're nowhere near where we need to be. There's still tons of work to be done, but hopefully there's some insight and direction that we can give for companies to improve on that issue.
Just a very quick follow-up for you, Maud, because yesterday and this morning, I think we referred quite a lot to the business sector and the private sector's responsibility also. This is not just something for governments or NGOs, civil society actors, activists, etc., but business has a role to play as well. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think business play a key role in making workplace more diverse and gender balanced. In any case, so for us, there are clear steps that business can take to address that, and I'm happy to cover that, I think, in our first step forward. But more generally, this is, I think, where most of the action takes place. If our company do not play a role and do not ensure that the workplace are diversified and gender balanced, then there's only so much that I think the rest of society can do.
Thank you. Caroline, so you've given us some of your thoughts over the last day and a half, but here I'm going to ask you your main takeaways. What's really inspired you going forward? And what are you going to do going forward as well in terms of EIGE?
Yes, thank you. Of course, I mean, we will follow up on this forum. So maybe I can share with you some thoughts that we have internally. So what we will do, we will compile the key outcomes, and I will release a chair statement with a forward-looking scope, taking both EIGE and you into account, the broader gender equality movement, through the next steps ahead of the Gender Equality Forum in 2024. Because our intention is to organize this forum every second year, and in between we won't be silent. But the first thing I will do, I will launch this chair statement, where I include everything we have heard today. It's not an exhaustive overview of each session, nor it's a negotiated document by all participants. It's my statement, it's my thoughts, it's what I got out of this forum. And this statement will be the jumping off point for further activities and preparations between now and the forum in 2024. The statement will be published around 10th of December, 2022, International Human Rights Day. So I don't believe that just by organizing this forum, there should be no follow-up. That's what happens often with conferences, but we can't stay silent. So you will hear from me around 10th of December. That's the first thing I would like to say here. And then also, secondly, a few words about EIGE's ongoing work this and next year. So EIGE will roll out a cyber violence campaign during the 10 days of activism based on the key findings of EIGE's research. And the inputs during today's cyber violence session are an inspirational reminder of the relevance of the topic and also the need for EIGE to support the data collection on cyber violence. I've really sensed this need. I mean, I was in the session this morning. I walked a bit from session to session, but it really came out as a very important thing to me, and you can count on us for this. We will also continue in our cooperation with the Fundamental Rights Agency, our sister agency in Vienna, in conducting the Violence Against Women survey, with the results expected to be out in 2024. You all might know that FRA did the first survey in 2014, a long time ago, and now together with FRA and Eurostat, we're working on the second survey, and the results are to be expected in 2024. Thirdly, in terms of ongoing work this and next year, of course, we will further provide evidence-based input to the Commission and the Member States on key findings in our Index 2022 and survey on care and social activities. Particularly in relation to the care package that was mentioned several times in the forum, as well as the other EU policy and legislative files. And last but not least, we will continue our work on gender mainstreaming, promoting gender budgeting and the gender-responsive public procurement, developing gender-responsive evaluation in the Green Agenda. And then a few words about my takeaways. I shared them with you already yesterday, but of course on the second day, new things were mentioned. A few things. Again, intersectionality. You already mentioned this, Shara, but I think it's extremely relevant that it came up time after time, session after session in the forum. And I really look forward, as EIGE, to join forces with other agencies, European NGOs and communicators under the overall guidance of the Union of Equality. I would also like to further work with all of you on how to respond to gendered disinformation and how to respond to the backlash in gender equality. This Wednesday, EIGE will publish a short paper on legal and policy approaches to gender equality in the EU. We all know that the anti-gender movement, when they try to convince us on how gender equality is not an issue, is not important, they usually use these legal arguments. So hopefully this paper will help you to understand the legal commitments and the legal reality, the standards on gender equality in the European Union. And we will keep on engaging with you, our stakeholders, in a strategic way in our existing expert forum that is meeting this afternoon, during my country visits and via our gender mainstreaming thematic network, and in consultations including on EIGE's 2023 priority topic of gender equality in the Green Deal. And that's it for now, and my chair statement will follow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. Thank you very much. Intersectionality and gender disinformation, I think, are some very important questions that you've brought up, of course, and then telling us what you plan. So looking forward to the forum in 2024, among other things. So in Brussels, do we know?
We'll see.
Okay.
Maybe, Shara, I can add one thing, because I didn't mention it, but I think that something relevant was said yesterday. It's about fixing the systems. It really resonated with me. And I think that, I mean, I'm thinking back to my own...
It was Robert Franken, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I've heard so often in my own country when I worked in Dutch government, and unfortunately also some of the governmental representatives were saying this, we can't find the women, and if we find them, they don't want the jobs, or they have no ambition. And really, it is about fixing the systems. We should really also not forget about this. It's not about fixing women, it's not about fixing people. Fixing the systems is of utmost importance in European Union. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Lenita, let's now look at the 3 steps forward, perhaps for the Swedish presidency, and then your personal as well.
When it comes to my personal, I think it's based on what I said before. We need more data.
Yourself. What are you going to do?
Oh, I'll end with that, I think. I'll end with that. So I think more data, generally. I talked about this dual approach, working both with awareness-raising activities and legislation. I talked about the implementation gaps. We need to focus on that, and also talked about building alliances with, all kinds of groups in all their diversity. When it comes to the presidency, Sweden is looking forward to this upcoming presidency, which starts on the 1st of January. The program is still to be settled. But we're very happy to have been working in our trio, in our troika, with France and with the Czech Republic. And as you know, we have this trio declaration, which focuses on primarily 2 major topics. And the first one is recovery, and the second one is gender-based violence. So we will continue to work on those 2 aspects. We're particularly happy with our work with the Troika, because we have planned our work at a very early stage, having kind of a Prague initiative, a Stockholm initiative, etc., over the years, which then has resulted in this trio declaration. We will also organize breakfast meetings for ministers ahead of EPSCO meetings. We've organized joint activities, side events at CSW in New York. And we also organized mutual learning programs, which we have co-chaired together. So we have done quite a lot of work together in the Troika, and we hope that we have contributed to improving some kind of standards. So we hope that our work will inspire the upcoming Troika in their work, because we believe that this is good for gender equality. It makes gender equality more strategic and more sustainable. When it comes to the presidency again, Sweden, of course, will continue on the work that France has begun, and the Czech Republic after France. So we will continue in the same path, and we will finalize whatever we can finalize. I promise that we will be an honest broker.
So the question would be, what can you finalize?
We hope to be able to finalize the Istanbul Convention.
The
Istanbul Convention.
Yeah, okay, big
That's
deal. Very, very
it's a big thing.
That's a major step forward.
Yeah. But otherwise, we'll be happy to give it to the Spanish presidency.
Okay.
But we will we'll do our best. We'll definitely do our best.
Okay, A for effort then.
Yes.
Okay.
And we also work on the recovery aspects. So we've asked...
Keeping gender on the table.
Exactly. And we asked EIGE to do a report for us, which will cover gender equality and gender mainstreaming in the RRF. and the consequences for women and men in all their diversity due to
The economic
RS.
downturn.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Something to look forward to then. Okay. Panagiotis, from your point of view as well, going ahead, what are your 3 steps forward?
Well, at a personal level, I think as I really want to see a union of equality and a union united in diversity in a meaningful way.
Yes, you and me both.
And especially after what happened in Bratislava with the murder of the gay couple. I think it's quite important as well to understand that gender mainstreaming and empowering women benefits all. So in my personal level, as an educator, I will do my best to learn first from women and their experiences or from all the diverse groups to be a better educator, and I think that's the first step. The second step is to share the stories and the lessons I've learned and to be active in a political way or in an educational way to be able to bring, as a man, and the privilege that I bring, the space and opportunities to the people that do not have the same opportunities as me. And the third level is to truly stay motivated, no matter the time it takes in the policy level at least, to push for that change and the union of equality that I wish to see at least one day. At the European Youth Forum level, I might be departing this year as a board member, but I'm quite sure, and from the work that we have done, is first to allow and invest in our members to engage in this dialogue and in this process. It's very important with their experiences and their capacity to bring in the lessons learned at the local and national level, but also transfer the stories and what we have collected in spaces like this back to them, and I think that's key part. The second step is to invest in our advocacy when it comes to tackling inequalities, and I think that's important beyond gender mainstreaming, and creating and fighting for spaces and channels of participation and a rights-based approach in policymaking and decision-making. And most importantly, in the third step, is to make sure that we also create the spaces for youth and people of vulnerable positions to represent themselves as equals in these spaces of decision-making.
At the moment, Panagiotis, how do you actually engage with decision makers on these issues? Through consultations, on white papers, and the rest of it?
There's several ways. For example, there might be some consultations, as they were mentioned in our session, for example, for Horizon 2020, or with the European Year of Youth, that you might have some policy consultations on some policy debates, which they allow, in a way, us to consult our members and create kind of collecting the experiences and good practices to share to the decision makers, or in many cases as well, be part of the decision-making table. It's not the majority of the process. It's not the majority of seeing as well when we're on the table reflecting what we have discussed on the table, which is sometimes problematic. But there is a diversity of ways, and I think that's the important part, to at least make sure that it's not tokenistic and it's not, in a way, fake participation, but it's meaningful, and at the end of the day, with the consensus, we take a step forward again when it comes to youth policy, at least, or whatever is, should be mainstream as a youth policy.
Right, because yesterday there was a suggestion that data collection, there should be also more inclusive civil society interaction and contribution to that.
Absolutely, and it should be like that, and also protecting civil society, because at the current times we live with the impact that COVID had, is also we're seeing non-democratic governments, and we're seeing also a shrinking space for civil society organizations, which are the core of what makes democracy so diverse, so engaging, because we are the voices, or we try to be the voices of the citizens. So we also need to protect that sector as well if we truly believe in engagement and inequality.
Thank you very much for that. Maud, going forward for you, the 3 steps forward?
Absolutely. I think I've been really struck by what you were saying about fixing the system, because in our research this year, we really see 2 big hurdles that, stop us from making more progress. again, in the labor market world, I think it's extremely difficult for women to get that first manager role. We see a drop of 9% between women and men getting that first manager role. And we know that if you don't get it in the first 10 years of your career, then it's much harder for women than for men to get it at a later stage. We also see internal mobility issue. Our research shows that men are 1/3 more likely to be promoted internally than women. So just a couple of examples to show, I think, how the system clearly needs to be fixed. And so from, again, perhaps more a labor market perspective, based on this research, what we think could be a 3-step forward, or at least what we would encourage companies certainly to take, would be obviously flexibility. That is something that I think have been covered extensively over the past couple of days. We know that women are 24% more likely to apply for a remote position or for a more flexible position. But I think we're also very keen to say, okay, flexibility is great, but it needs to be standard for both men and women, because otherwise women have a more flexible role maybe, but that means they take on board more of the care work, and that's obviously not something we want to see, going on. The second step forward would be, as I said, internal mobility. So that's clearly an issue there, and how company can ensure that this gap is reduced. There's probably many different ways to do that. I think what we have highlighted is the need for more mentoring or hot housing training for women at pre-manager level, so that, from the beginning of their career, we can coach them and ensure that there's better, like this, the gender gap on that level is being reduced. And the final maybe step forward that we think is important, and it's been forever, but it's worth repeating the fact that inclusive hiring practices are absolutely key. And like a lot of things are perhaps done not enough. I think what we've seen that has worked would be more gender balance panel, discussion about salary, actually, making sure that you're not asking for prior salary, maybe, as part of the interview process, so as to reduce the kind of starting salary discussion. That has often a detrimental impact on women. Many other things, like family-friendly benefits, maybe the last example I can give. But as much family-friendly benefits as you can get as well for both men and women would be helpful. So I think maybe how we see things, or at least a few directions that we would recommend for a company to take to try to improve that system. And from a maybe more personal perspective, what I thought has worked, at least very much for myself, career, is really mentoring from more senior women in my field. I've seen the difference that it just makes you know you're not the only one facing those issues. You have found women who have found ways to deal with that. And creating that network has been extremely important. And that's something I'm trying to recreate maybe with more junior colleagues to, again, path a way forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And also for the practical information on hiring practices and mobility within the organization. So, Carleen, I'm going to ask you, a couple of comments have come in which I think are quite interesting. One comment says that please ensure that older women and the issue of aging is included in the intersectionality aspect of gender equality. And I think that's something that's really important to highlight as well. So thank you for that. And there's another comment which is, I think, also very relevant. It's important to have more research on all these topics and not just data. And I think that's an important aspect of it, and long-term assessment of to ensure structural change is needed. So maybe a couple of comments from you on that. And then finally, your 3 steps forward, obviously, but also it's not just about one organization, in this case EIGE, sort of going forward. We've talked about how it's a participatory process, collective action is needed. So perhaps a few comments on that as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I think I already shared my thoughts about this, but of course I can come back to this again. It is indeed true that throughout the forum, not only in the session on data collection, but it became very clear that there's such a gap, such an information gap, a data gap. At the same time, we also heard from the participants that there's different organizations collecting information and data. So as I said, I think what EIGE should do and will do, we will connect with other stakeholders to see if we join forces, what can we bring about? I recently spoke with a representative of Equinet, who told me how much information they have about what citizens experience in their daily life. I would also like to speak with the Commission about this, because the Commission, of course, has launched all these beautiful strategies. A strategy on LGBTI people, a strategy on people with disability, the gender equality strategy. And what struck me is that in all those strategies, they talk about the relevance of intersectionality. But still, if we don't watch out, these strategies are implemented in silos. And I think it would be extremely relevant to sit together with the Commission and also other data collectors and to see how, through joining forces, we can help the Commission and also the member states in truly implement those strategies. It's important, but to be able to implement them, we have to know what is the situation of women and men in all their diversity in the European Union. So you need that baseline.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's extremely relevant. So we will, as I said, we will also take the initiative to take this forward. It was an important message that I heard throughout the forum. And yeah, we will take it up and also speak with the Commission about this.
Right. And then going forward, Carleen, we have a few minutes before we end the session. What would be your message, let's say, or a message now? You would probably give it in your speech as well, but just something very personal that you would like to say about the day and a half that we've spent together, and what you're taking back personally as well from the great emotion and, I have to say, sentiments and interaction that we've had.
Yeah. Well, I truly, truly enjoyed the forum. I said this morning to someone, usually when you celebrate your birthday, you don't enjoy because you're running from one point to the other. Yes. But I truly, truly enjoyed it. I truly enjoyed meeting, I didn't meet you, all of you personally, of course, but I'm so happy that you all joined, both in Brussels and online, and that we have such a diversity in the participation. Sometimes when you go to these gender equality events, you meet the same people time after time. It feels a little bit like speaking with the ones who are already convinced. And although I feel that we all are convinced that gender equality matters, I have met many new people, many new stakeholders, many new colleagues. And for me, that was extremely fruitful and also rich. What I personally feel that in these, of course, difficult times, and again, the gender equality index doesn't give a rosy picture, but I feel that we should not give up. That's one thing. And also, we should speak up. I think it's extremely relevant, especially in these difficult times with all these anti-gender movements and anti-gender, let's say, initiatives. Let's not be shy. Let's be courageous, and let's speak up. And hopefully, EIGE, we will soon publish a second paper that is linked to these anti-gender narratives and movements. This paper might also help you. Hopefully it will help you to also see how best to communicate. Mm-hmm. We don't have the wisdom, but we are collecting good practices. But let's agree with each other that we don't give up. We fight for the good cause, and let's speak up, wherever we are.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed to Carleen, Maud, Panagiotis, and Lenita for this closing session. This brings my fascinating tasks to an end. I have to say, for me personally as well, it's been a fascinating journey. As an analyst and a think tanker and a commentator, I write about this. I'm passionate about inclusion, diversity, equity, equality, and intersectionality. Perhaps you've read my pieces. I keep writing about this. And I actually do speak up and don't give up. And this battle for the union of equality that Panagiotis you have referred to, I think is the real value of Europe. This is what gives us strength as Europe, and this is what makes Europe worth it. And that's what democracy is all about. So thank you very much. I hope I can stay in touch with all of you. You know where to find me. And as I said, personally, it's been a very, very important journey for me as well. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for your support.